It had been 10 long years, and the town of Millbrook had barely changed. The clock on the old courthouse ticked forward. Yet for Alexander Hood, time had frozen the moment he walked away. He hadn't planned on returning, but here he was, stepping back onto the cracked pavement of a town that had witnessed his most devastating betrayal. Once the golden boy of Millbrook, Alex had it all: power, wealth, a beautiful wife, and a bright future. That is, until the day he walked into his office to find his entire world unraveling in the worst possible way. His wife, Emily, and his best friend, Luke, were more than just lovers. They were the architects of his downfall. The company he had built from the ground up was stolen from under him. His life turned into a spectacle of public humiliation. The betrayal was not just business, it was personal. With everything taken away in one brutal stroke, Alex vanished from the public eye, disappearing into self-imposed exile. Now, after a decade of rebuilding and reinvention, Alex stood at the edge of Millbrook once more, a ghost of his former self. His reputation, long shredded, had forced him into the shadows of society. But it was time to return. His past might have been stolen, but his future was his to reclaim. What Alex Hood didn't know, as he stared at the broken skyline of his childhood home, was that the real story of his return hadn't even begun. As Alex stepped into the familiar crumbling streets of Millbrook, a strange mixture of anger and nostalgia swirled in his chest. The town was barely recognizable from the vibrant place he had once known. Where there had been life, now there was decay. Empty storefronts lined the main street. Weeds choked the sidewalks, and the once bustling tech park stood as a shell of its former self. The people were gone, the opportunities faded, and the air itself seemed heavy with failure. Millbrook wasn't just a shadow of its former self, it was a warning of what happens when dreams crumble under betrayal. For Alex, the return was never about nostalgia. It was a mission, a need to rebuild not just for himself, but for the town that had once thrived on his vision. Millbrook was on the edge of economic ruin, and Alex had come back with a plan to develop the very tech park that had been at the heart of his former empire. He had the resources, the knowledge, and the drive to make it work. But could he do it without repeating the mistakes of his past? As he walked the streets, the faces of old acquaintances haunted him. Some were unrecognizable, others avoided eye contact, still others looked at him with a mix of pity and disdain. Alex could almost feel their eyes on him, judging him for the fall he had taken. Their betrayal had been swift, but his survival had been quiet. And now, all he wanted was to show them he was more than the failure they had once written him off to be. The tension in the air was palpable. Millbrook had rejected him once. Would it accept him now? The moment Alex set foot back in Millbrook, he knew his return would mean facing the ghosts of his past, including the family he had left behind. His relationship with his biological family had always been strained, but the betrayal he had suffered 10 years ago had deepened the wounds. His mother, Caroline, was the mastermind of much of the manipulation that had guided his life in ways he had never fully realized. A cold, calculating woman, she had always been more concerned with appearances than with true connection. She'd pushed Alex into the world of business from an early age, emphasizing success above all else. She'd never asked what he wanted, what he dreamed of, or what made him happy. Instead, she had orchestrated his marriage to Emily, encouraged his partnership with Luke, and watched as he spiraled into his own ambition. When things fell apart, Caroline was the first to cast him aside, distancing herself from the public scandal and keeping her hands clean. Now, as Alex approached her house, the memories of those manipulations felt like a tightening noose around his throat. His father, Bruce, was a quiet man, always on the sidelines, never quite engaged in the drama, but never enough of a force to stop Caroline's machinations. Bruce had always been a man of few words, and over the years, Alex had come to understand that his father's silence was a kind of surrender to Caroline's domineering influence. Reconnecting with him was as difficult as it was inevitable, and Alex wondered if he would ever be able to see his father as anything more than a passive participant in the family's manipulation of his life. But amid the ruins of his biological family, there was a different kind of family. One Alex had built on his own terms. Emma, Thomas, and Lucas weren't his biological children, But their bond was stronger than any of the connections he had with his blood relatives. Emma was a quiet force, an artistic soul who had grounded him when he thought he was beyond saving. Thomas, a fiercely intelligent young man, had been the spark Alex needed to rediscover his passion for innovation. Lucas, the youngest, reminded him that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there was always room for joy and hope. They weren't just his children in the traditional sense. They were the family Alex had chosen, the family that had never betrayed him. Their loyalty and love had been his lifeline during the darkest years of his exile. But now, as he re-entered the orbit of his biological family, Alex was torn. He needed to move forward, but how could he do so without confronting the painful legacy of his past? Could he truly leave behind the old wounds, or would they always haunt him, pulling him back into a world of manipulation and control? Alex had always believed in the power of reinvention, and his return to Millbrook wasn't just about confronting the past, it was about creating something new, something better. His vision for the tech park was bold, an innovation hub that would breathe new life into Millbrook's decaying economy. He saw a future where tech startups thrived, attracting talent from across the region, creating jobs, and shifting the town's identity from one of stagnation to one of forward momentum. The planning stage was grueling. Alex knew that turning the old tech park into a thriving center of innovation wouldn't be easy. He met with architects, investors, and city planners, each meeting laced with challenges. There were financial hurdles, bureaucratic red tape, and an overwhelming sense of skepticism from locals who had seen too many failed promises. Some resisted the very idea of change, clinging to a nostalgic image of Millbrook's past that was long gone. Others, like his old business partner Luke, saw Alex's return as a threat to their own power and influence in the town. The tension was palpable in the room as Alex sat across from the city council, trying to convince them that this project was the key to Millbrook's survival. He could feel the eyes of the council members on him, some curious, others dismissive. His name had been associated with failure, with scandal, and it was hard for them to believe in the man who had once fallen so far. Alex wasn't just selling a plan, he was selling a vision, and he knew that if he couldn't get them to believe in him, the project would die before it even started. But as the meetings wore on, something unexpected began to happen. Despite the resistance, Alex started to form new relationships, ones that weren't tainted by the mistakes of his past. A few key figures from the younger generation, eager to see Millbrook thrive, began to lend their support. They weren't bound by the old power structures, and their fresh perspective was exactly what Alex needed. However, it was clear that this would be no easy fight. The old guard, the same people who had turned their backs on him years ago, were not about to give up their control without a struggle. The tension between Alex and these entrenched interests was only beginning to simmer. And though he had his eyes on the prize, Alex knew that every step forward would come at a price. The future of Millbrook rested on the success of the tech park. But in order to build something new, Alex would have to tear down the walls of the past, both personally and professionally. The day the betrayal was fully revealed was a day Alex would never forget. It wasn't the kind of discovery that came in a single dramatic moment. It was a slow unraveling, like a thread being pulled until everything came undone. He had noticed the signs, whispers in the office, odd glances between Marissa and Bruce, but nothing had prepared him for the truth. It was the night he found the email. His world tilted on its axis as he stared at the damning words on the screen. Photos, messages, and a confession that turned his stomach. Marissa, the woman he had loved and built a life with, had been having an affair with Bruce, his own father. Not just an affair, but a relationship that had been hidden for months, perhaps years, right under his nose. The emotional toll was immediate. His heart, once full of ambition and hope, now felt hollow. He could hardly breathe, let alone think straight. The public scandal that followed was swift and merciless. The media seized on the story, parading the details of his humiliation for the world to see. His company's stock plummeted, and his reputation, already fragile, was shattered. Friends and colleagues who once praised him now looked at him with pity, or worse, disdain. The fall was swift and unforgiving. The emotional cost of the deception wasn't just about the betrayal itself. It was the realization that his view of family had been irreparably changed. The foundation of his world, the people who were supposed to support and love him, had turned into the very agents of his downfall. It was more than just the loss of his wife and best friend. It was the loss of his belief in the very idea of family, in the sanctity of trust. In the months following his return to Millbrook, Alex threw himself into the rebuilding of his life, not just his personal life, but his professional legacy. He was determined to reclaim what he had lost, and he did so through Hood Innovations, the company he had founded years ago, but had abandoned when everything fell apart. This time, though, he was focused not just on the tech park, but on building something that would stand the test of time, a legacy of integrity and innovation, one that didn't rely on the broken trust of the past. Hood Innovations was more than just a business venture. It was Alex's second chance. He poured his energy into revitalizing the tech park, transforming it from a derelict space into a hub of creativity and technological growth. Every decision he made, every meeting he attended, was shaped by a single guiding principle: to build a company that valued integrity above all else. He wasn't interested in shortcuts or quick wins. For the first time in his life, Alex knew that success was measured not by profit margins or headlines, but by the impact he could have on his community, on the future of Millbrook. But Alex didn't do it alone. Emma, Thomas, and Lucas, his non-biological children, became an integral part of his work and his life. Emma, with her creative vision, began managing the branding and marketing efforts, helping to shape the narrative of Hood Innovations. Thomas, with his sharp mind for technology, quickly became a leader within the company's research and development division. Lucas, ever the optimist, worked on outreach and partnerships, always finding ways to connect with local businesses and schools, ensuring the tech park wasn't just a symbol of economic growth, but a catalyst for community involvement. The bond Alex shared with his children was unlike any he had experienced with his biological family. They didn't just support him, they believed in him. They saw the man he was becoming, the man he wanted to be. They understood the price he had paid and the sacrifices he was willing to make to build something lasting. Their loyalty wasn't born out of obligation, it was earned. As Alex navigated the growing pains of building a new business, he also had to contend with the internal conflict that simmered beneath the surface. His biological family, particularly his mother Caroline and father Bruce, had not remained silent during his return. Though Alex had distanced himself from them, they remained a shadow in his life. Caroline, always calculating, now wanted a piece of the tech park project, offering financial backing in exchange for influence. Bruce, his quiet yet ever-present father, continued to stand by Caroline's side, his silence more condemning than any words he could speak. The tension was undeniable. Alex knew he couldn't completely shut them out. He needed the financial support for the tech park, and his history with his father was complicated at best. But every encounter with them served as a reminder of the brokenness of his past. The conflict between family loyalty and personal integrity became a daily battle. Would he ever be able to move past the ghosts of his betrayal? Or would they always haunt him, waiting to pull him back into a world of manipulation and deceit? In the end, Alex knew the only way forward was to continue building what he had started. With his non-biological children by his side and a renewed sense of purpose, the foundation of Hood Innovations was more than just concrete and steel. It was trust, loyalty, and the understanding that for the first time in his life, Alex had the power to create something that was truly his own. And this time, it wasn't built on deception. It was built on the promise of a future where integrity reigned. Reconnecting with his biological family was inevitable, but Alex had no idea how painful it would be. Each encounter brought back old wounds, and the contrast between his values and theirs became more apparent with every conversation. Caroline, his mother, was the first to approach him after his return. She had always been the orchestrator, the one who controlled everything, from his business ventures to his relationships. But now there was something different in her demeanor. Her usual coldness had softened, replaced by an almost fragile sense of guilt. She tried to reach out to him, her voice tentative, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and longing for reconciliation. "Alex, I know I've made mistakes. I never wanted to hurt you." But Alex could see through her words. She wasn't seeking reconciliation out of love. She was seeking absolution. The guilt in her eyes was less about the pain she had caused him and more about her own inability to control the narrative. He had always been her puppet, and now that he had severed those strings, she couldn't stand the thought of being cut off completely. Bruce, his father, was a different matter. Where Caroline wore her guilt like a cloak, Bruce wore his bitterness like armor. He didn't apologize, and he didn't offer any solace. Instead, he tried to maintain a sense of authority over Alex's life. His attempts to maintain influence, both within the family and the business, were transparent. He made subtle suggestions, trying to nudge Alex toward decisions that suited him, as though he were still the patriarch of the family. "You could still use my experience, Alex. Don't let your pride stand in the way," Bruce would say, his words heavy with unspoken expectation. Alex could feel the manipulation in every syllable, and it repulsed him. But it wasn't just the business dealings. It was everything about their family dynamic that left him cold. They had always played a game of appearances, masking their dysfunction with smiles and facades. Alex had been the prize they fought over, the token of their success. Now, as an adult, Alex saw through their masks. He saw their desperation to maintain control, their fear of losing the influence they once had over him. And he wasn't having it. With every encounter, the divide between Alex and his biological family grew wider. Their values, their sense of entitlement, and their need to manipulate and control felt foreign to him. Alex had changed, and the family he had once tried so hard to please no longer fit into his new world. As he walked away from each interaction, he felt the weight of the past lifting from his shoulders. He didn't need their approval anymore. He had built a new family, one based on trust, loyalty, and mutual respect. Despite the weight of his past, Alex couldn't ignore the undeniable progress Hood Innovations was making. It was still early days, but the changes in Millbrook were already beginning to take shape. The once dilapidated tech park, the heart of Alex's vision, had started to attract attention. New businesses were opening their doors, and entrepreneurs were flocking to Millbrook, eager to tap into the resources Alex had worked so hard to develop. The first major startup to take root in the park was a software company focused on sustainable energy solutions. Alex had worked closely with them to ensure the infrastructure was in place. And now, as he walked through the halls of the gleaming new offices, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The tech park was no longer just an idea. It was a thriving, vibrant center of innovation. Local businesses were benefiting from the influx of talent and resources, and for the first time in years, there was a palpable sense of optimism in the air. With each new business that opened, the town began to come alive. The once empty streets were now filled with people, and the sound of construction filled the air as new buildings went up, replacing the abandoned storefronts and warehouses that had once defined Millbrook. The population had begun to grow again, as people from surrounding towns moved to Millbrook for the job opportunities that Alex's vision had created. It was a revival, not just of the town's economy, but of its spirit. The impact of the tech park went beyond just jobs and business growth. It was a shift in the very identity of Millbrook. The town, once known for its stagnation and decline, was becoming a place of progress, a place where innovation was not just a buzzword, but a way of life. And at the center of it all was Alex, quietly guiding Hood Innovations to new heights. But what satisfied him most wasn't just the tangible success, it was the sense of purpose it gave him. He wasn't just building a business, he was rebuilding his life, piece by piece. The pride he felt in the growth of the town mirrored the personal transformation he was going through. Alex had come back to Millbrook broken, betrayed, and lost. But now, as he looked out over the revitalized tech park, he saw something else. He saw a new future, one where he had created something meaningful, something lasting.
In the end, the success of Hood Innovations wasn't just about financial gain or prestige. It was about proving to himself and to those who had once doubted him that he could rise above the mistakes of the past and build something that was truly his. As Hood Innovations continued to flourish, so too did the lives of Alex's non-biological children. Emma, Lucas, and Thomas had grown into individuals of remarkable depth, each finding their own path in the world while remaining steadfastly connected to Alex. They were no longer just his adopted children. They were integral to his personal and professional life, with their own unique successes that paralleled the growth of the company and the revitalization of Millbrook. Emma, with her gentle but powerful presence, had found her calling in therapeutic movement. She had always had a way of understanding people's emotions through their bodies, and after years of study, she opened a studio focused on helping individuals reconnect with their physical and mental well-being. Her practice was centered around healing, both for her clients and for herself. When Emma spoke about her work, Alex could see the fulfillment in her eyes, the sense that she had found not just a career, but her purpose. He admired how she used her empathy to foster connections, both within her clients and in the broader community. Lucas, ever the tech whiz, had grown into a rising star in the tech world. He had a natural talent for coding and an intuitive grasp of new technologies, which made him an invaluable asset to Hood Innovations. After successfully leading the development of the company's first major app for the tech park, Lucas had gained recognition in the industry. His achievements were a testament to his vision and determination, and Alex couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride as he watched Lucas take the reins of new projects, his leadership style resembling the best of Alex's own traits. Thomas, always the strategist, had taken on a leadership role within the company, managing the day-to-day operations and overseeing new ventures. His sharp mind for business and his innate ability to inspire his team had made him one of the youngest leaders in the company's history. Alex had been thrilled to see him step up, not just as an employee, but as someone who truly understood the heart of the company. What struck Alex most, however, was the evolving relationship he shared with each of them. They were not just employees or students. They were his children in the truest sense of the word. With each passing day, their bond deepened. Emma, Lucas, and Thomas were his mentors, his partners, and his friends. They filled the spaces his biological family had once occupied, and in doing so, had redefined what family meant to him. No longer was it bound by blood, but by love, respect, and shared experiences. Together, they represented the symbolic power of a chosen family, a family that had been built on trust and mutual respect rather than obligation or manipulation. Alex had learned that while blood may connect people, it was the choices you made that defined your real family. As the success of Hood Innovations grew, so did the distance between Alex and his biological family. The tension between him and his mother, Caroline, continued to simmer, while Bruce's attempts at maintaining control became more overt. Yet, as much as Alex had tried to distance himself, the pull of the past lingered, especially when it came to his parents. Caroline, still clinging to the hope that Alex would forgive her, made one final attempt at reconciliation. It came in the form of a letter, one that Alex had expected but never truly wanted. The words within were filled with guilt and regret, but also with a call to heal the rift between them. "I've made so many mistakes, Alex," she wrote, "but you're my son, and I'm sorry for the pain I caused." Her plea for forgiveness wasn't about truly understanding the depth of her actions. It was about easing her own conscience. Alex could feel it, the weight of her selfishness, even in her apology. Bruce, on the other hand, remained silent. He had never been one for words, and his bitterness had only grown over the years. His life had unraveled just as much as Alex's, though perhaps in different ways. Alex had heard whispers of Bruce's failed business ventures and his fractured personal life, but none of that mattered. Bruce had shown him, time and again, that he was incapable of real change, and Alex knew it. Then there was Marissa. Alex didn't know what to make of her anymore. The woman who had once been his wife, the one who betrayed him in the cruelest of ways, had disappeared from his life entirely. He had heard rumors of her attempts at redemption, but the wound was too deep. Forgiveness, Alex realized, wasn't something that came easily. It was something that had to be earned, and Marissa had never shown any true remorse. It was in this moment, sitting alone with the letter from Caroline, that Alex faced a decision. Could he forgive them, or was cutting them off once and for all the only path forward? The tension within him was palpable. The unresolved emotions of betrayal, anger, and hurt threatened to overtake him. But as he thought about the people who had truly been there for him, Emma, Lucas, Thomas, he realized that the answer wasn't in holding on to the past. Peace, Alex understood now, didn't come from revenge or even from forgiveness. It came from choosing who he wanted to be, not based on the actions of those who had wronged him, but based on the strength and integrity he had built within himself. His biological family might never understand, but Alex had already chosen a different path. It wasn't about erasing them from his life. It was about giving himself permission to walk away from the hurt they had caused and towards the family he had chosen for himself. The years had passed, and with them, Alex had built something far greater than he had ever imagined, a legacy. Hood Innovations was no longer just a business. It had become the beating heart of Millbrook's transformation. The once neglected town, which had seemed like a forgotten relic of the past, was now a bustling hub of innovation, a place where new ideas thrived and where the future was being written every day. The tech park Alex had fought so hard to develop was a symbol of that change, a space where businesses and young minds came together to create the new era of Millbrook. The company's influence had reached far beyond just economic revival. Hood Innovations had become a pillar of integrity, standing as a model of ethical business practices. Alex's insistence on doing things the right way, on valuing people over profits, on fostering an environment of inclusivity and collaboration had paid off. The employees weren't just workers, they were partners, empowered to make decisions, contribute their ideas, and share in the company's success. There were no shortcuts, no compromises. Hood Innovations was built on the belief that businesses could thrive while doing good, and that principle was embedded in every facet of the company. Millbrook itself had been reshaped. The streets, once lined with empty storefronts, were now full of new businesses, each one playing a part in the town's economic resurgence. The population was growing, and with it the town's sense of purpose. Local schools had partnered with the tech park to provide students with hands-on learning experiences, and young people were flocking to Millbrook for the job opportunities that Alex had created. Millbrook had gone from a place of decay to a model of hope, proving that revitalization was possible with vision, perseverance, and most importantly, integrity. For Alex, the journey had been nothing short of transformative. He had gone from a man devastated by betrayal, his wife, his best friend, his family's manipulations, to a leader who understood the true meaning of resilience. His pain had been the catalyst for change, but it was his ability to find purpose in that pain that had allowed him to rise above it. No longer defined by the scandal that had shattered his life, Alex had become a symbol of perseverance, a testament to the power of choice. He had chosen not to let his past define him, not to be a victim of betrayal, but to use his experiences to fuel the creation of something meaningful, something lasting. In building Hood Innovations and revitalizing Millbrook, Alex had built more than just a business or a town. He had created a legacy that would endure beyond his own lifetime, a legacy of resilience, integrity, and the belief that we all have the power to choose who we become, no matter what circumstances we face. He had proved that, no matter how deep the pain, there is always the possibility of redemption, and that success is not measured in wealth or status, but in the impact we make on the lives of others. The culmination of Alex's journey and the themes that had shaped his life was clear. He had turned the darkest chapter of his life into a source of strength. He had built something that was not only a triumph over his past, but a beacon for others who were struggling to find their way. The legacy of Hood Innovations was not just in the buildings and the businesses, it was in the lives it touched, the minds it inspired, and the future it helped create. Through integrity, resilience, and the power of choice, Alex had proven that it was possible to transform the deepest of betrayals into the foundation of something truly extraordinary.
5 years had passed, and the scars of the past had faded into quiet reminders rather than open wounds. Millbrook had fully stepped into its renaissance, and at the center of it stood Alex Hood, not just as a businessman, but as a community leader, mentor, and father. His name, once marred by scandal, was now synonymous with resilience and transformation. Hood Innovations had grown beyond anything he'd originally envisioned, expanding into new sectors while staying rooted in the values that made it more than just a company: innovation, integrity, and inclusivity. Emma had opened satellite wellness centers across the region, helping people heal not only their bodies, but their lives. Lucas had founded a successful cybersecurity startup with backing from Hood Innovations, and Thomas had stepped into the CEO role of the company, allowing Alex to finally take a step back. They were thriving, strong, capable, and kind, and they carried forward Alex's legacy with the same care and passion he had once poured into every decision. The bitterness that had once clouded Alex's heart had slowly given way to peace. He no longer carried the weight of his mother's manipulation, Bruce's bitterness, or Marissa's betrayal. Those ghosts had lost their power. He hadn't sought revenge. He had chosen growth, and in doing so, he had set himself free. New relationships had taken root: genuine friendships, meaningful partnerships, and even the beginnings of something more in his personal life. Alex had learned to open his heart again, not without caution, but with courage. The man who once walked back into Millbrook full of pain and anger had become someone deeply grounded, grateful, and whole. Looking around at what he had helped build, Alex saw clearly now: family had never been about blood. It had always been about the people who showed up, who stayed, who believed. It was about the people who helped you rebuild when you had nothing left. And through Emma, Thomas, Lucas, and the life they'd created together, Alex had finally found the home he'd always longed for. As the sun dipped low behind the tech park's glass-paneled skyline, Alex stood quietly on the balcony of Hood Innovations, surrounded by Emma, Lucas, and Thomas, his chosen family. The laughter, the connection, the future they had built together. It was all real. Because real strength isn't found in wealth, revenge, or titles. It's found in the quiet decision to keep moving forward, to choose growth over bitterness, and to build something meaningful from the ashes. We don't get to choose our past, but we do get to choose who we become. And that's where the real story begins, one choice at a time.